1. This happened this morning. To anyone not in childcare or who doesn't share a child with a parent, who doesn't have custody and/or visitation, this may not seem like a big deal. But for me it was extremely unnerving. A little background. I worked for a non-profit school-age service provider, who provided before and after care, full day-out care, and summer care until pulled out of the last 5 county schools they still operated in. The county childcare provider is taking over the 5 schools in the county that were still using the non-profit. I was hired by the county to take over as site director for the school I worked at last year come fall. But for summer, I'm the assistant director at an established school to learn the ropes. There is 1 child from my school, and a handful from a school I subbed at with the non-profit. Beyond that, I don't know any of the students or parents. This morning I was the adult in charge as the other assistant director wasn't scheduled to come in yet, and the site director was at a meeting with the school superintendent, county school principals, and pretty much all the upper leadership for school-age services. Most of the kids had gone outside with site assistants, 4 stayed inside with me, and 2 other assistants who were checking we had the supplies needed for next week. I was doing some paperwork at the parent sign-in table when a woman came in the cafeteria door. School-age service runs mostly out of the cafeteria. She said she was the mother of a child and asked to see him. Not thinking anything of it, I called for the child to be sent in from the playground. All was fine for about a minute when she announced she was signing him out. Something in the tone of her voice alerted me that something wasn't right. I quickly pulled him up in the system, asked for her full name, and she wasn't on the contact list at all. When I informed her of this, she protested, saying that per the agreement she had with the father, she could take him with her. I told her I had to call Dad, and she tried to get me to call the site director. I called Dad anyway, and I couldn't hear anything he said over Mom running her mouth and other noise in the cafeteria. She asked to talk to Dad, then said in this overly loud voice, "Okay, that's good, you can pick him up tomorrow. He said I could sign him out today." She hung up on Dad and tried to lie that Dad okayed the agreement. Again, something in the way she was acting told me she was lying and something was wrong. I told her I had to hear it from Dad, so she gave me his number, which wasn't what I dialed the first time. I'm sure that if the call had gone through, another man would have answered. While I was trying to call him, he was trying to call me. I answered the second time he tried, and the first thing out of his mouth was he heard what she said and not to let his son leave with her. As of Friday last, she lost visitation. She already had lost any custody. Of course, I didn't know this because he was not one of my kids from the old program. She called her son to her, and I jumped up and moved around the table to block the door. I'm not entirely sure what I thought I was going to do if she decided to push past me, but I would have tried to keep her there. My father is a US Marine who taught me useful self-defense tricks, and I'd like to think my staff would have stepped in to help. I told one of the female staff to go to the office. She stared at me for a minute, not understanding until I repeated, to go to the office. She finally understood and quickly left the room. Mom picked her son up and was holding him while I had Dad on the phone. I remained on the phone to Dad while telling her she was not authorized to take the child. She continued to try to reason with me and demand to see the new paperwork. I have no idea where the site director kept it, or if she even had it. Mom said if I couldn't show her, she was taking her son. Dad begged me not to let her take him, and to call the sheriff if I had to. She was holding her child tight with one arm. Keep in mind her son was 5 or 6 and not small. She was squeezing him so tight he had tears in her eyes, and was squirming to get down while whimpering some. She was oblivious to this, and she argued with me that she was his mommy, and she was taking him with her. She ripped the bottom half of my shopping list off and wrote down an address, telling me to tell Dad he could find them there. I remained where I was and again told her she was not taking him because she was not authorized. I was trying to get Dad off the phone so I could call the police. Mom abruptly turned and marched towards the exit of the cafeteria that led into the school. I hung up on Dad and dialed 911. I quickly explained to the dispatcher that a non-custodial parent was trying to take the child off school property and had headed into the school, possibly toward another exit. I stepped outside the cafeteria door and watched the main door to see if she came out that way. Again, not sure what I would have done if she had gone out the front door, but my only option would have been to try to block her or tackle her. During this time, she came back into the cafeteria and continued to argue with me while holding her son, unaware that I was no longer talking to Dad. She kept telling me what to tell Dad. After about 3 minutes, but which felt like a half hour, the deputy arrived. He got out of his car and I stepped outside to meet him and tell him what was going on. Mom stepped out and tried to reason with him that she had a right to her son. I stepped inside and called Dad and handed the phone to the deputy, so Dad could explain everything that happened. The deputy told her that he sided with me and my decision not to release her son to her, given the circumstances. She was unhappy with this and went from anger to tears to phony understanding. You know, the whole I don't want to make a scene because I love my son while making a scene. When the deputy stepped inside the cafeteria, I ordered the children in the cafeteria to be taken to the computer lab, and used a walkie-talkie to order the children outside to be kept there until 10:30 a.m. In the middle of this, the other assistant director arrived for her shift, and I called her over to hear the deputy explain to Mom what Dad said, that he was standing by our decision to keep the boy there, and offer his information and for her to call his superior if she didn't agree with anything. Her son had started playing a video game and she wanted to spend a few minutes with him, and went over, throwing her keys at me to show me she wasn't going to try anything. The deputy looked at me and I told him I wasn't comfortable with her being here anymore and asked him to remove her. It took quite a while for him to convince her to leave. I had to call for the group outside to be taken to a classroom, and some to go to the computer lab. I sent the club activity books down for the kids to do instead of the scheduled activities. Someone said something to the deputy over his earset, and he replied 10-4. A couple of minutes later, a second deputy arrived. Mom finally left, making a big show on her way out. She was upset that the sympathy ploy didn't work. She asked me for my name and phone number, so I gave her my name and the site number. She left and the deputy promised to follow her to make sure she left the area. Here's the creepiest part. She wasn't parked in the parking lot. She walked out of the school lot down the street, like she didn't want anyone to see her car. I was subpoenaed by Dad's attorney to appear in case I needed to testify about the incident at the school. I found out later while preparing for court with the county attorney that Mom had lied to the deputy about a lot of things. She kept saying she didn't know the outcome of the last hearing, where her visitation was stripped because she'd left early. In reality, she'd behaved so badly that the judge told her to leave the courtroom like an adult, return to the courtroom like an adult, and leave again like an adult. The judge then called a recess because he needed to calm himself down after dealing with Mom and her antics. Her whole demeanor was creepy. I have no doubt in my heart she was intending to kidnap him, a thought which was confirmed by the revelation that she knew all along she didn't have visitation anymore. She attempted to get her son, presumably before Dad let the program know of the change in circumstances. He had let the site director know, but she hadn't told me till after the fact. Earlier this year, in another part of the state, a school allowed an uncle who was once listed as okay to pick up, to sign out a child, and the child was missing for 2 weeks before being recovered alive. No one at the office checked to see if the uncle was still authorized to pick up. They took him at his word. I think Mom was counting on my simply taking her at her word and letting the boy go. The way she was speaking was indicative of someone who was very nervous. She clearly didn't expect me to check the record, and definitely didn't expect me to call Dad or block her exit. I believe when she left the cafeteria she had no idea where she was going and was forced to come back. She may have run into the other camp that was held at the school. She clearly didn't have a plan B. The deputy said he'd return at 2:30 p.m. and stay until the program closed for the day and the last staff left. The incident shook me because so many things could have happened. I was distracted billing drop-in students. If I hadn't stopped to pay attention and picked up on the subtle tones in her voice that put up red flags, I could have just let him go on her word. My co-workers that saw her all agree she seemed to be unbalanced. Who knows what she would have done if she got her son off property? Would she have run? Would she have hurt or killed him to get at Dad, or if he fussed? Seeing her hold him in a way that made his eyes tear up was a huge red flag. The look of anger, annoyance, and defiance on her face as she glared at me, blocking the door, made my heart beat faster, and I had to struggle to keep my voice calm while talking to the dispatcher. She could have attacked me to get away with her son. She could have bolted out his side door and got away with him. I'm thankful that Dad answered the phone and then called me back when Mom hung up on him. I'm glad the deputy got there so fast and escorted her off the property. I'm glad he returned in case she tried again. Most of all, I'm glad my staff is so awesome. They followed my directions without hesitation and didn't hold my harsh tone against me. They knew something was wrong and rolled with it to keep the kids safe, and blissfully ignorant. I instructed my male staff to secure all the exterior doors, and I'm thankful they had the foresight to inform the other camp of what was going on, so no doors would be left propped open or strangers let in. I'm thankful come August I'll be working at my school again, away from all that. So creepy, possibly intent on kidnapping Mom, I hope we never meet again. 2. My old man told me this story when I was a kid. I recorded our conversation so I could write the story for him. The story will be read as if it were my dad. My name is Dave. I currently live in Baltimore, Maryland, but this story takes place in my hometown of Silver Spring, Maryland. It was 1978, so I was about, 24 years old. Yikes, I'm getting old. Anyway, 2 of my buddies and I found a cheap 3-bedroom apartment at this beat-up building known as White Oak Towers. As we were moving in, I asked the woman who was moving out why she was selling this place for such a low price. Does it need repairs? She said that 2 years prior, 1976, a woman was shot and killed in this apartment and now haunts the apartment. I didn't believe in ghosts or anything, and shit, I didn't care. It was cheap and near my work. This is where it gets weird. Literally the night we moved in there, I started hearing strange noises and felt a sense of dread. I noticed that every single night at 11:30 on the dot, I could hear what sounded like loud thumping footsteps. They would start from the hallway and always end up creaking into my room, right at the foot of my bed, and then it would stop. It felt like someone's presence was in front of my bed. I tried to brush it off. I was just learning my trade to be an AC mechanic, so I was assuming that there must be some pipes or electrical work in the building making that noise. It was still happening every single night, 11:30, always on time. The following day I asked my roommates if they ever heard the thumping. Their rooms were down the hall, so they didn't hear anything. My best friend, Spanky, of 40+ years, handed me a joint to help me calm down. What can I say, I was a hippie back then. I decided to try and go to bed at a different time to see if I could hear it then. I went to bed at 10:30. While I was sleeping, I was awoken by the thumping getting even louder. And guess what time it is? Dang. I'm starting to panic a bit, so I light up the rest of my roach. Now that I'm feeling better and more confident, I stood up, out the bed, naked. Yep, I sleep nude. Who freaking doesn't? Anyway, I'm standing on the cold wooden floor and gently say out loud, I don't know who you are or what you want, but the noises are freaking me out. Look, I don't care at all if you stay here, but can you please stop making the noises? It's scaring me. I laid down back in bed and thought to myself, what I did was silly bullshit, but you never know. Night rolls around, and I'm going to bed. It's 11:30, and I hear nothing. Then the next night, and the next night, and so on. I couldn't believe it. She respected my request. Nothing ever happened after that. I lived there for about a year and was ready to move. While I was taking some of my stuff down the hall, one of my neighbors asked if I was leaving because of the haunting. I said, "What haunting?" "Hello, this is David Jr., his son. I used this technique in my own ghost experience, and it really works. Give them respect, and they might oblige. I'll tell my story another time." 3. In the year 2000, I had lost my mother, and have had sporadic dreams of her here and there over the years. One dream that I frequently have had was one of a staircase and a door. In some of the dreams, I hear my mother beckoning me behind the door. In others, I just see the stairs. I climb the staircase, but it just keeps getting longer and longer. It was like climbing up a downhill escalator. When I finally reach the top and open the door, I wake up to my own reality. This dream has been recurring until 2012. That year I had to undergo surgery. It was my very first time I'd be put under, and I was afraid. The last thing I remembered before the anesthesia kicked in was feeling helpless and scared. Soon everything was pitch black. While I was under, I had that same dream again, only this time it was different. In the dream, I hear someone call out for me. "Tewa? Tewa, is that you?" A figure emerges from the dark. I immediately recognize it to be my childhood friend. I hadn't seen nor heard from in years. A quick bit of background information. As far back as I can remember, I've only ever been in the same place for about 3 weeks, and frequently changed schools. Because of this, I was not very sociable and had a hard time making friends. It wasn't until the year 2000 that I managed to stay in one spot for 3 months. There I met Ruben, a boy about my age at the time. He used to walk me to the bus stop every morning since I moved there. He was the closest thing to a best friend I've ever had. The very last time I saw him was on Valentine's Day of that year. I never saw or heard from him again. Anywho, back to the story. He then tells me I have to follow him. And where does he lead me? Yep, to the staircase. I tell him I don't want to go because if I do I'll wake up. He takes my hand and smiles. "Don't worry. I promise it'll be different." We ascend the staircase together hand in hand, and I hear sounds of laughter and music. It was like a party behind the door this time. I take a glance at my friend, who smiles and gestures me to open the door. I clench my eyes shut, expecting to wake up. Instead, I'm greeted with a whole bunch of people whom I don't know personally, but for some reason knew me. It was indeed a party. There were a lot of people that kept hugging me and telling me how they missed me and such. After an unexpected turn of events, I see her. "Mom?" I say in disbelief. She smiles warmly at me and extends her arms outward while walking towards me. I can see she's in an all-white dress suit and glowing radiantly. Without missing a heartbeat, I run into her arms and begin sobbing. Though I knew it was a dream, that hug felt as real and warm as in real life. She tells me she's proud of me and misses me. After an overwhelming reunion, we start to talk. It's usually just catching up and whatnot. As I get comfortable, it soon dawns on me that I was finally able to get through the door and see my mom. I never could before, so why now? Puzzled, I ask if I'm dead. It only made sense to me, seeing how before surgery I always woke up after opening the door. She smiles amused and says, "No, but it's time to wake up." I'm welling up in tears again and tell her I don't want to leave. She gives me a kiss on the forehead and tells me to look after myself and family. I hold on tightly as everything disappears in white. I wake groggily up in the hospital, fluorescent lights shining down on me, and see I am in the recovery unit. It has been 4 years since I've had that dream. I've never had it again. 4. I am a mother of 4, and have, until recently, had been sharing a room with my children. I no longer sleep in my own bed, as it had been dominated by my 2 youngest children, and since then have taken to sleeping on the living room couch. One night I jerked awake, only to find I wasn't physically awake. Subconsciously, I was aware, but my eyes refused to open. No matter how hard I tried, they just would not open. I then tried to move, but I couldn't. The sensation wasn't a feeling of someone or something on top of me, but rather it was as if my body was made of stone itself. Pushing as hard as I could, I finally made it up. Only, I made it up out of my body. I was literally having an out-of-body experience. I soon heard voices down the hall toward my bedroom. My kids are 6, 4, 2, and 1 week. This voice was of a woman talking to my kids, forgetting I'm not physically awake. I go into full mama bear mode and try to run towards my kids. However, with every move I made, it felt like my feet were stepping on upright pin needles. The pain was so intense, I trip but don't faceplant. Instead I hover. Not paying too much attention to care at that moment, I hover down the hall to check on my kids. The further I get down, I notice an entire change of scenery. I am no longer in my house. I still hear the same voice talking, in what is supposed to be my room. When I enter the room, I see a young mother consoling a tearful daughter, who had apparently awoken from a nightmare. Confused at the situation, I ask who they are. I am ignored. I then raised my voice a bit louder. "Who are you? Where are my babies?" The little girl looks up where I'm at and screams. Her mother looks in my direction wide-eyed and holds her daughter closer. She says to her, "Pray, darling, pray." In a huddle, I hear them pray the Lord's Prayer. You know, the Our Father who art in heaven prayer? Realizing I frightened them, I saunter closer to them and put my hand on the woman's shoulder to tell her I meant no harm and apologize for scaring her. However, the second I made contact, I was pushed back by an unseen force and felt as though I was thrown down the hallway. I fell right back into my body so hard I felt my body bounce right off the couch, and I awoke in a cold sweat. I run down the hallway to check on my kids, and found they are still sound asleep. I am by no means religious, however I am spiritually aware. For example, I do believe in gods and spirits, but I do not let either dictate how I choose to live my life. I do not practice Christianity, Catholic, Lutheran, Mormon, or any other organized religion. I live my life with the values I see fit for myself. Perhaps this dream was the Lord's form of punishment for not accepting His Son as my Savior. What are your thoughts? 5. As I write this, I am getting many repressed memories. But here is what my mother and I remember. This story takes place in Washington State in the year 2006 or 2007. My father was gone to the fishing boats in Alaska, as he had been laid off work, and this was the last resort for funds to be able to provide for the family. My mother was a stay-at-home mother. She did not know any English at the time. My mother and I went to yard sales, garage sales for clothing, as there are no clothing stores and my mother does not have a driver's license. One time we were at a yard sale, and this Native American who had 2 children with her had approached my mother and told her that there was a very large yard sale in town, and even offered us a ride to this alleged yard sale. When she tells us to stay there for 5 minutes, and that she is just going to get her red Chevy. As we were waiting, we decided to go to the edge of the street as the yard sale had been held in the backyard. When we saw her standing by her car talking on her cell phone, and frantically gesturing for us to approach the car, as if she was in a rush to leave as soon as possible, we get in her car, and soon start leaving city limits towards the more empty area that is just farmland and part forest. In the best English my mother could speak in, She told the Native American lady that she needed to go back to town, or my father would get angry. As soon as my mother said this, the Native American lady's expression turned from happiness to horror. I will never forget the look in her face. She dropped my mother and I about 5 streets down from where we lived. My mother and I walked back home. That afternoon I was asleep, but my mother was in the guest room cleaning when she said that she saw the Native American lady in her red car, with 3 men driving slowly down the street a few times. As my mother noticed this, she hid, hoping that the people hadn't noticed her through the window. The car drove back down the street a few more times until relenting. My mother and I never saw that lady or her children ever again. But whenever my mother sees a red Chevy, my mother's face goes cold and lifeless. She will forever be changed in a negative way that made her more protective. And I'm glad that I did have this experience, as it better prepared me for the dangers that I would encounter on my own. But that is a story for a different occasion. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Scary Subscriber Stories, episode 29. I really should change the name of that. They're not always scary, but they are always subscriber stories. Anyway, thank you very much to everyone who sent their stories in for this episode. It's very much appreciated. If you happen to have a story you would like to send in, then just either click where it says show more and scroll down to the bottom, the email address is there, or just type the address that's currently on screen. That will get your stories to me. Okay, let's see where we are. Any news? Yeah, I might have a collaboration. It won't be on this channel, it'll be on someone else's channel coming out later in the week. There's a few details we need to work out before that goes ahead, but hopefully that should be later in the week, so I'll let you guys know when it happens and I'll link you to it. Let me think. This is Tuesday now, so yep, the plans are currently just the usual videos this week. We'll have more scary stories tomorrow. I think I'm okay for glitch stories. Sorted for paranormal. I think I've got more than I need for that. And fingers and toes crossed for a TIFU this Saturday. Okay, I'm going to head off for now because I'm a little ill right now. I'm sure it'll pass quickly enough, but I'm kind of losing my energy. So I'm going to down a can of Rockstar. I've got one in the freezer. It's not really a good idea for cans, but they're usually fine if you put them in for like 30 minutes or so. So hopefully it's got to that point where it's not frozen solid, but it is kind of slushy, which is the way I like them. So I'm going to go grab that and hopefully energize myself. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.